Hello, Merry Meet. So, when I made my video about my own experiences with needle phobia, I said I would make a video about this, and I also want to make it because I've gotten a few reactions with people asking if I am an anti-vaxxer, and generally it seems people think that if you are an occultist or a New Ager and you have any kind of reservation whatsoever against any kind of vaccination, then you are an anti-vaxxer. So while this is a little bit on the side of what I usually address, since I usually discuss occult topics, Gorian topics, Gothic topics, and this is more of a social and health topic, I do touch a little bit into the New Age zone because I do want to address a little bit of a kick towards the anti-vaxxers as well, that sort of make anybody who considers themselves to be a New Ager look sort of silly and dangerous. So no, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Vaccines are great. There's a reason why we don't have polio as a huge problem anymore, and several other diseases that used to kill people in droves, which now is extremely rare and tend to only show up in some immigrant populations, and that is vaccines. And when you get to a point where a certain percentage of the population is vaccinated, you tend to have the situation where the disease starts to die out because there's just not enough hosts. So, what have I been complaining about then if I'm not an anti-vaxxer? Well, you see, I don't think that there's some sort of... Let's just get some of these claims out of the window. Vaccines do not cause people to get autism. The reason why I have Asperger's syndrome, which is a type of autism, is not because I was vaccinated as a kid. 2. Vaccines were not made by the government to suppress psychic abilities in children. 3. It is not all some sort of scam by the big pharma companies, though there are things within that they do which I will address later, which is an issue. 3. No, vaccines do not contain monkey livers and guinea pig testicles. I don't know all of these different claims, but there are some claims of that is just hilarious. So let's get that out of the way first. I think that it's very wise to vaccinate yourself and vaccinate your children. But there have to be some bounds of reason. So, in Norway, we have, for boys, 4 vaccinations in an age where you assume children will remember it. Basically, when you look at, and this, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the tendency towards needle phobia. If you look at how many vaccines somebody gets before the age of around 3, then it doesn't matter a lot, because while some of us do have memories from before we were 3 years old, they used to be usually rather sketchy, and there's a limit for how long we keep a memory. But it has been shown that the more vaccines and basically encounters with needles a child has from the time it's 3 until it is adult, the more likely it is that child will develop needle phobia. It should be somewhat logical. Now, in Norway, it is 11 diseases that are vaccinated against. So that means that from children start at school until they start high school, there are 4 vaccinations for boys and 7 for girls, because girls also get vaccination against hepatitis, which can develop cancer, and it's so stupid that boys doesn't get offered that as well, because they're also at risk, but never mind that. It's a discussion for another day, but that means for 10 years, it's 10 years of schooling. There are a total of either 4 or 7 vaccinations. In most cases, there are years between each vaccination, and there's 1 stick for each time. When we get into high school, a lot of people also take a vaccination against I don't know what the English word for the disease is. It's basically, we call it inflammation of that sac around the brain. It is has a tendency to develop when you have a lot of kids gathering, like in parties and such. So a lot of teenagers take that, but it's not part of the vaccination program. It is not very common for people to vaccinate the healthy children against the flu. It's sort of assumed that people will get the flu now and again. And besides flu vaccine, if we're talking about dangerous vaccines, like the vaccine against polio and tetanus and such, are not dangerous. They have been tried and used for so many years that they, of course, anybody can get an adverse reaction, but that's fairly rare. However, the flu shot is developed each year, and there is where we can find some issues. And most people just don't vaccinate themselves against the flu unless they are weakened in some way, so that getting the flu will be an issue. So, what I'm getting at with this is that Norway, of course, there are people that have needle phobia in Norway. I have needle phobia. But it isn't some sort of rampant epidemic, which is in the United States, where in the United States, around 10% of the population, that means if you put 10 people up on a line, at least one of them will have so strong needle phobia that it will adversely affect their health. Basically, they will not go to seek medical attention when they need it, or will do so only hesitantly. So it is a phobia with a real problem, and as much as 40 to 70% have issues, emotional issues, when they have to go and get a shot. Why do we have this enormous degree of phobia in the United States? Well, I said that in Norway there are 4 for boys and 7 for girls when it comes to being stuck by the needle when you're in school, and each time it's once. Yeah, in the United States there are usually around 30, and now we're talking about just for the ages where the kids are old enough to remember, so with school age. There are 30 sticks, and some places have twice that, so we have 60. These are often bundled up, so that it's not unusual for kids to have 5 or 6 sticks at once. Sometimes it's even more. I talked with one girl who said that in their school they had 10 sticks for one day. They had 10 different shots for one day. Now we are starting to talk about something that's traumatic. Here's the thing. Shots hurt. It is usually not what somebody would consider an enormous pain, but it hurts. Now, if you go in and you suffer a mild to moderate pain for a few seconds, and then you're done, then there might be some fear. And of course, there is that discomfort. But then it's for a few seconds and it's done. However, if you get 5 or at least 10 sticks, then you suffer that fear and apprehension 10 times. And that pain 10 times, that's a much more traumatic experience. And especially if these children is experiencing that in addition to being held down by medical professionals or parents, that's torture. If somebody held you down and stuck you with a needle 10 times, you would consider that to be torture. Why wouldn't you consider it the same when it's a child? It's insane. It's insane. And I consider it to be legal child abuse to let somebody stick your child with a needle 10 fucking times. And the thing is, so you go along with this. You let somebody eat, you hold them down yourself by then betraying that child's trust, or you let somebody do that and they stick them with a needle 10 times while that child is screaming and begging. Okay. And then that kid is 18, can decide for themselves, and she discovers a lump in her chest and decides, you know what, I don't want to risk being stung again, so I'm not even going to the doctor. Or perhaps I even become so afraid of doctor's offices because they used to be held down that, yeah. And in fact, your child, if you treat your child this way, you are more likely that your kid will die or become seriously hurt by an illness they do not go to the doctor and have treated because of phobias your abuse have created, than of attracting some sort of illness. So yeah, this isn't okay, and it's also completely unnecessary. Norway doesn't have any greater extent of people dying of horrible illnesses than the United States. In fact, we have less death per capita. Now, of course, some of that is attributed to our healthcare system where everybody can afford healthcare. But even so, there's a lot of illnesses that are vaccinated against in the United States, which are definitely not necessary. They're not serious illnesses. There is no need to force a kid through the trauma of having a needle stung into them to vaccinate against these illnesses. Find the most serious illnesses and vaccinate against those. Do not basically just add to it the lists that are vaccinated against, and then bundle it up so that the kid have to suffer several sticks. And we also see, those that have started to research on this, that basically the more sticks a kid experiences at once, the more traumatic he or she usually finds it. And it's exponential. Basically, if the kid found the first stick to be tolerable, the next stick is worse, and then the third is completely intolerable, and by the fourth they are in a panic. And there's a few reasons for this. First of all, is that pain tends to be exponential. If I were to snap a cane over your ass, you would probably just be able to continue with the day. You would say, ouch. It would hurt. And you might develop a bruise. And you'll go on with your day. However, if somebody held you down and I gave you 10 of those smacks across the ass, you would find that a lot more traumatic than that one single hit. And you would find it a lot more traumatic than the pain of one of those times 3. And that times 10. Because that's how pain works. Also, remember this, vaccines are put into muscle. And what usually hurt when it comes to vaccine. It's not the needle itself, because that's fairly sharp, very sharp in fact. And if the one doing the vaccination is fairly competent, you can stick a needle into somebody and cause a fair, not too much pain, unless the person in question are very sensitive. So, the problem is that you have the measure of fluids that you are then pushing into muscle. That will cause tears in the muscle. It will bruise the muscle. And if it is 1 milliliter dose, then it's uncomfortable. It's what it is. If it's fucking 10, then that's suddenly 5 milliliters in each arm. And generally speaking, the World Health Organization recommends that a child that is not fully grown, or a small woman, or somebody who is very thin, should never have injected more than 2 milliliters into any one muscle at any one time. But here we have then 5 in each arm, because it's this large muscle here that I've forgotten the name of that they usually use because it's the safest. And each time you then strain that muscle, that will cause more pain. In addition to the burning of the medicine, so it basically goes from being a slightly uncomfortable experience that can usually be made okay again by an ice cream to torture. So that's it. It's far too many vaccines at once. There should never be more than 1 stick at a time. And there should be quite some time between each, so that it's not something where the kid is completely overwhelmed. That's one of the important things. And why are there so many vaccines? There's where the big pharma companies comes in, because they do earn money on this. So no, they haven't put monkey brains in the vaccines to make your kids not be psychic anymore. But that they do try to sell in to the various health governments the idea that all of these diseases needs to be vaccinated against. Of course they do, because that's what they earn money on. So as a parent, you should consider what vaccines are actually necessary, so that you not only protect your child against illness, but you also protect them against debilitating phobias that can prevent them from seeking health care later. So that's the first thing on the agenda. The other thing is that why are not pain relief offered? Well, I could tell you why. It's because there's this negative culture where you can see all the YouTube videos where people are being ridiculed for being afraid of shots. And it's this idea that, no, that's just something you should get over. And if you find it painful, then you're just weak. Which is just stupid. And the second is that, of course, offering pain relief will take a little longer. And it's a business, it's about the money. And this problem we have here in Norway is too. It's basically if you directly ask for advice around things for pain relief, for shots, blood tests, and so on, you will get it. But it's not something that's offered. And it should be. Basically, most people that work on preventing needle phobia recommend that it should be the norm, not exception, it should be the norm. You should not stick needles into kids without first providing basic pain management. You should try your very best to make such an experience as comfortable as possible, because, hey, 10 years along the line, those vaccines ain't really going anymore. There's very few of them that will last give you protection your entire life. So you want that kid, let's say they have that vaccine when they are 8, you want them when they are 18 to willingly go to the doctor and have a booster. And if they are used to pain and degradation at the doctor's office, they're going to do that. So, what should be done is basically, first of all, more research in how to do it as comfortable as possible, but the medicine, there are quite a few of them, for pain relief should always be offered. Because if the kid experiences far less pain, it's also far less likely that they are going to develop a trauma over it and then develop a phobia. So that's very important. It's a preventative measure that is definitely good for people's health. I mean, even you have 10% of the population are not going to the doctor because of fear. Reducing the number that has that fear is worth the extra time and effort it takes to offer proper pain management than just saying, oh no, a shot doesn't hurt. Yeah, it does. And for a child, it's worse than for an adult. So yeah, offer cold sprays, numbing creams, and if the child is really nervous, more. And that's one thing. If a child is really, really nervous and cries and begs you to not stick them with a needle, they are definitely in the danger zone of a phobia. And then you need to treat them more than delicately. So screaming at them and telling them that they're stupid and weak for making a fuss isn't the thing to do. Forcing them isn't the thing to do. Then providing proper pain relief and counseling for their phobia, that's the way to go. So they don't develop a phobia strong enough that when they are adults, they will not go to the doctor. So yeah. And that's the third point I want to make. Don't bloody force vaccines on kids. Here's the thing. If there's some sort of absolutely life necessary treatment a child has to have, your child has diabetes and they just will not let you inject them with insulin. You have to. The other child will die or go blind then and there. If your child has cut themselves open on something and they are bleeding, they need to go to the doctor and have that tended to. Basically, if it's life and death there and there in a medical crisis, you try to convince the child. But if the child will not consent, you might have to force them to keep them alive. But even if you do, it should be done as kindly as possible, with as little force as possible, and you should provide as much pain relief as possible. However, when it comes to basically preventative medicine, you do not force a child. When I see a video and there's somebody who holds a child down to give them a flu shot, I just go into a rage, because here you have an adult that holds down a begging, crying child so that somebody can stick a needle into them that child definitely do not consent to prevent them having the flu. No. You never do that. Here's the thing. I have an extreme needle phobia. Mother never forced me, so that I'm not afraid of the doctor's office generally. I can go and I can have any thing needed done that doesn't involve needles. Because I'm not afraid of the doctor's office, I'm not afraid of dentists, I'm not afraid of men in white coats. But when you do things like that, not only is it degrading to the child, but you risk them having a general medical phobia, which means that even stepping a foot into the doctor's office will be a problem. Do not force children to have an injection unless it's an absolute medical emergency. Now, I'm not saying don't try to vaccinate them, and most children will be skeptical at first. But you try to talk with them. Tell them what the vaccine will do, ask them what they are afraid of, talk with them, have the patience to talk them into it. Of course, talk with them at the level they are. If they are 10-year-olds, they will understand a little bit better. If they're 5-year-olds, you might have to explain it simpler. But try to explain what the disease are that you're trying to vaccinate them for. why you have to do it, and basically take that. I mean, sometimes that means you have to return to the doctor's office several times. Of course it's easier to force them. So your kid screams and begs, they're dependent on you for their survival, they'll forgive you. The same if you beat the kid, they'll forgive you because they're dependent on you for their survival. It's human instinct to be rather forgiving about your caregiver. Doesn't make it right. You take as much time as you need to try to talk them into it. If that do not work, you try bribing them. And I hate that idea that some healthcare professionals have, that you should never bribe a guy because, oh, they need to learn that at times they have to do things that they don't want to. Yeah, that's what they learn when they have to do their chores, when they have to visit some that aunt that I have an issue with, but she's still family and she deserves a visit on her birthday, even if you want to stay home and play computer games. It's what they learn when they have to go to school, even if they really don't want to. That's where you teach kids that they have to do things at times that they don't want to. Kids should not learn that they have to be held down and be injected with something. That's not okay. So yes, bribe them. If a kid at this point still refuses to have that shot, after you have tried to talk to them and tried to bribe them and they're still terrified, they need help. They do not need you to sit on them and force them and hold them down. Unless it's a medical emergency, no, do not do that. Just because, oh, I'm big and I'm strong and I can do it. Yeah, eventually they will not be so easy to control, and then there's a good chance they will have a phobia, and that's it. At that point, when a phobia is in early stages, you take them to a counselor, you get them help, you deal with that phobia, and then you try to convince them again. And that will basically, in 99% of the cases, let you talk your child into getting that shot. However, if your child still doesn't want that flu shot, leave it be. It's not worth risking losing your child's trust using violence to give them that shot, because that's not okay. So yeah, I am not against vaccines. I think vaccines are a great thing, and when I have dealt with my own phobia, that's one of the first things I will do. I will refresh the vaccines that no longer work, because there's nearly 30 years since I had one. It is something that helps both the individual and society, and it's a lifesaver. But it's not worth vaccinating for everything. So even if I deal with my phobia and am no longer phobic of needles, I'm not going to go and have a flu shot each year, because I'm a young, healthy woman. And if I get the flu, it's not going to kill me. So yeah, it doesn't. And if I had a child and I lived in the United States, would I let someone stick several needles at a time into my child? Oh, hell no. But it's this illnesses that I would do my damn best to talk my child into getting vaccinated for. Yes, absolutely. So no, it's not like you say, that you have to say either you will accept whatever vaccines the government says, yeah, this you should be vaccinated against. No. At times you have to stop and think, 10 vaccines at once? Are you completely insane? I'm not going to let somebody stick a needle into my child 10 times. And being completely, oh no, there's hamster livers and there will be autists and there will be no, vaccines are horrible. There's a middle ground there where you say, hey, it's great preventative medicine. Here's other vaccines that are definitely sensible to vaccinate your child against. We will go for that. But no, we are not going completely overboard and give our child 60 shots during their school years. But we're not going to be completely insane and say, no, we're never going to vaccinate our child because pop science either. There's a middle ground there. And in all of this, when it comes to children are people. And while you are set to govern that child's life, you don't own that child. And it's more important that that child grows up to be a functioning, well-adjusted adult that will take care of their health than it is to force your will through. So you always, when you decide that force is necessary, you should always ask yourself several times, is force really necessary in this situation? Because every time you use force against your child, you have lost. You lose a little bit of trust. You create a traumatic experience for that child. And it is an abuse of power. Sometimes that abuse has to happen. It's still abuse. And you have to ask yourself in each and every case, is this worth it? So yeah, that is my thoughts on that. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments, please post them below. Have a great day, and blessed be.